First, I'll talk about shale gas, in part because it's probably the most significant hydrocarbon event in the history of this country since Alaskan oil was discovered. It's got issues. We'll discuss the issues. And in part, we'll discuss it because it might have relevance to North Carolina. I say might. It depends upon what exactly we've got. Diener has done the work, and USGS is going to come out with the report, allegedly this month. It may be next month. But then we'll know what we got, and then we'll see whether we can do it right or not, and try not to make the mistakes that some of the others made. So shale gas is actually found in about 5 major basins in the lower 48, and the 2 other major basins are in British Columbia and in Canada. So that's where they're located. And actually, I don't have this for you, but if you put, let me try and make sure we do this on time. We put a pipeline map on this, you'll see it's right on top of a pipeline map. So delivery is not going to be an issue if it happens. I prefer to say when it happens, but I'm going to use if because that is the way it should be. So what happened here? Where did this come from? All of a sudden, we got a lot of gas. Where did it come from? Well, it turns out that all hydrocarbons come from something called source rock. This is where the microorganisms were down there under pressure and temperature, and oil or gas got created in this source rock, which is generally shale. No, it's almost always shale. And then it usually migrates to another rock, which we call a porous rock, which is where the reservoirs are, which is where we normally used to drill. When I say we, meaning the world in general. But I'm going to warn you right now that having spent 35 years in the bloody business, it's very difficult for me not to say we when it comes to oil and gas. But I am not oil and gas. I don't have a dog in that hunt. By the way, ever since Michael Vick, nobody says dog in the fight anymore, at least shouldn't. And I'm not sure what dogs do on the hunt, but anyway, there we are. I guess they're going to collect them. But I do know a fair bit about it, so we can chat about it. So what happened was the industry discovered that you could get the hydrocarbon from the source. Nobody really felt that could be possible because the source rock is very, very impermeable. Permeability is the property that allows fluid to flow through rock. This stuff is about 1 million times worse in permeability than traditional rock offshore. So that's 1 million. That's a lot. Okay, so you can't really make it flow. So what they discovered was that hydraulic fracturing, and I'm not going into detail on it. I gave a lecture to the legislature on it. Some of you were probably there in the public audience, and we can discuss anything you all want. But I'm not going to go into the detail. But this is where you actually fracture the rock and get the gas to flow. And then the other thing that made it possible was something called horizontal drilling, where the well goes horizontally, and it'll go that way for 1 mile or 2 miles. So it's tricky, expensive, and so you need a fair bit of gas there to make it worthwhile. So this is what happened. These 2 technologies unleashed this huge potential, which previously was not there. And so it's a valid question to ask. I have done something bad. Okay, here we go. But there are issues. There are significant environmental issues with shale gas, and I'm going to sketchily cover most everything, and then we'll go into depth on anything you want. And then I will, to the extent that I can, and when I'm not able to, I will tell you that I don't know, and then give you a source or whatever. We'll handle that as it comes. So the 4 major concerns are, the first one is contamination of aquifers. This is water wells, you know, the movie Gasland and all that sort of thing. And so we'll discuss what solutions there might be. And by the way, it's my view there are solutions to these if we're prepared to do them. So you have to have the diligence to do it, and we'll discuss that. So some combination of sound drilling practices and regulatory oversight should overcome that one. Freshwater withdrawals, I will go into some depth in that because it has particular relevance to the state. But basically, the problem with this is it goes to the next point as well, which is flowback water disposal. All right, let me define what flowback water is for the moment. When you fracture the rock, you use a high volume of water. After you've done what you've done, it comes back up. Only about a third of it comes back up. The rest of it stays in the ground. That which comes back up is called flowback water, and discharge of that is a huge problem. It's happened in Pennsylvania and in New York and why it's a problem primarily is that what comes back is much more salty than what you put in. If you put in fresh water, it'll come back anything from 16,000 parts per million to even 300,000 parts per million. To give you a frame of reference, seawater is about 35,000 parts per million. So a lot more saline than seawater. We can't just dump that. We can't use it for anything, and it's an issue. So disposal of flowback water is an issue. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss how to ameliorate that. On freshwater withdrawals is an aspect of the problem, and I will discuss with you a solution to that, particularly for North Carolina. And then finally, the actual chemicals in the frac fluid. It turns out, you get lucky here, the fracturing that's done with shale gas, very little chemicals are used, and there's a reason for that. The reason is economic reason, not because, well, anyway. And so the chemicals used are small in quantity, and they are getting greener. Now, there have been issues, like the service companies have refused to divulge what they are on the basis of proprietary know-how or something. That is basically bunk, and and one should require them to be disclosed, and there shouldn't be an issue. There might be a proprietary little bit of that. That too can be disclosed in the right circumstances, but transparency is going to be an important point here. And everyone's going to have to do their part if we're going to get this one right. So, if you got a zero discharge and zero water withdrawals, that is in fact, I spoke at the EPA, as you probably know, is conducting a study, a congressionally mandated study, which they will reveal in 2012. They'll release in 2012. They held some workshops. I gave a talk at one of the workshops on water, and in that one, I came right out and said zero water withdrawals, no freshwater usage. Now, there's a whole bunch of people from industry were there, other experts. Nobody actually threw up. So we'll see where it goes. And I'll tell you what it's about and how that works and why I think it's possible, particularly in this state. So, but what is required to allow that is what's known as salt tolerance. The industry has always used fresh water. It doesn't have to. So what's happened is the industry has changed their fracture fluid, modified it to allow saline water to be used, and that will allow us to do what I'm going to suggest probably on the next slide. I say probably, I looked at it last night, but I'm not certain. It's there, though. It's somewhere in the slide back. All right, so what are the potential issues with high salt? I'm not going to go into it because unless anybody cares, but it's not just a matter of salt tolerance for the fracture fluid. There are some other issues. I'm mindful of the time relative to what you all want to hear. The EPA people were very interested in this detailing of what the problem might be, other problems, what divalent ions do and so forth. You may not care about it. We'll come back to it if you do. So what are the waters of convenience? I call them waters of convenience. Saline waters of convenience that we might want to use. Seawater is the simplest. It's terrific stuff. It's got very little of anything objectionable in it. Even divalent, well, anyway, we won't go into the detail. But, and it averages about 35,000. I say averages, depending on which sea it is, by the way, it's different. It can be much lower or not much lower or higher than 35. It's a good canonical number to use. So that is great. Not everything is near the sea. So saline aquifers. Now, this is the key. All right, so what are these things? These things are all water in the ground. I'm going to give truisms. Truisms mean they're mostly right, but then you've got a Gaussian distribution. There's a tail that says it's wrong. But there's a truism that, by the way, I think that's the origin of the phrase that the exception proves the rule. But anyway, that might be the origin of the phrase. I don't know. But here's what the truism is. As you go down in the earth, the water gets saltier, where it goes. Okay. So this is why all fresh water is found shallow, which is sort of good because our wells don't have to be very deep, minus 350 feet. That's pretty deep, though. That's somewhat unusually deep. So as you go deeper, it gets saltier. So that means that there's a bunch of water down there which are saline, which we have no use for at this time. We should access those. The USGS has done a map of this, but the last time they populated this map was in 1965. Now, I think the reason is, by the way, that's the last century. The reason is that nobody cared, I think. What are you going to do with it? So why go ahead and map it? I don't even know why they mapped it in the first place. All right. Now, what you got there, the key, what I want to point out is a bit hard to read, but North Carolina is there in light brown. Light brown is 500 to 1,000 feet deep. Okay, so I think we can expect aquifers, saline aquifers in North Carolina between 500 and 1,000 feet deep. And by the way, there's a lot of white space in North Carolina there, which means they just didn't look there. That doesn't mean it's not there. And there's a lot of white space everywhere else too. But the key point from a national standpoint is you lay that on top of the previous map, and you'll see there's saline aquifers everywhere there's shale gas, pretty much, okay? Except perhaps in Wyoming and maybe not even that, okay? So it is a feasible thing, what I'm going to suggest, which is that we use saline water. Now, it's a small warning. When you withdraw water from a saline aquifer, it could affect your fresh water in the sense that these things can be in communication, particularly when you're close to the coast. So the hydrology of your fresh water could be affected. So I'm not going to throw this out and say this is all easy, can be done. I'm going to suggest that it should be looked at very carefully. As I told you, the people assembled at the EPA workshop did not find any major objection to it. In fact, I found one outfit that's actually doing it. It's in British Columbia, which is the other country. But it's happening. All right. So now in that case, it was particularly convenient to do so. And then we could use produced water. But produced water is more tricky, and we will not discuss it unless somebody cares. So what are some of the environmental solutions relative to shale gas? One is, I didn't mention it, but especially the Marcellus, and it might be in this state, almost all of the gas is in populated areas or in farms. The roads were not built for a bunch of heavy trucks. And unless there is a tax, and Rep. Gillespie told me that, well, if we get a tax, I don't think he said we will get a tax, but if we get a royalty on this, then it'll be used for things like that. And I said, that's great. But that's what's needed. What is needed is some sort of royalties to address some of the issues which were not contemplated before, which is heavy traffic. But there are some things the industry can do to ameliorate that, and that is something called pad drilling, PAD. What this is you can drill multiple wells from a single site. This is up to 20 wells from a single site. This has several interesting implications to it. One, if you're going to do any water purification to recycle the water, it's easier to do when you can agglomerate, when you accumulate some of these wells. Okay, so there's economies of scale. The other is better regulatory oversight, in the sense that, I was talking to this Pennsylvania DEP woman who said, fine, we'll have regulations, but I don't have enough inspectors already, and you're going to have a proliferation of wells. This is true, all right? But things like pad drilling will allow fewer inspectors. In fact, technology will allow that the inspectors may not even have to be on the pad, but we won't go there unless somebody cares. So one is this so-called pad drilling. Now, it can't happen instantaneously. It will happen after a few wells, because the first wells, you don't know for sure what you got, so you can't make it a pad. The zero discharge target. We need to explore it. I think it's achievable, but there is another way to do that. One is to just reuse the water. I won't call it recycling, because recycling means use it for another purpose. Use it for the same purpose, reuse it. Or something called deep discharge wells. The deep discharge wells in the Barnett in Texas, the cost of discharging it into a deep aquifer is 15 to 25 cents a barrel. let me tell you, folks, that is a very small number, okay? Because if you want somebody to haul it away, it's going to cost you $5. And it'll go to some place you maybe don't want it to go. So we have to seriously look at reusing and or explore deep disposal. And again, we'll have to get the geologists to look to see what's possible. Fracture fluids have to become greener. That's happening. We have to insist upon it, and it's doable. And then finally, we just need industry to cooperate, innovate, and most importantly, be transparent. There was too much of this reluctance to disclose stuff. Some of it is what I think the lawyers call slippery slope. Okay, they didn't want to disclose this because then you'll ask for more. Take an inch, get a mile type of argument. That's fine. Okay, but if you do that, then there's no progress. And so, fortunately, we have some movement in that area. But it's something that can be regulated. In other words, just require disclosure, and that's that. And then finally, the community should be willing to listen and cooperate as needed. And to that extent, during the Q&A, and I'm trying to keep this to 30 minutes, we can discuss any of these things. And as I said, if I understand it, I'll tell you. Now, let me switch gears. Let's talk about what's going to happen with oil. This is the model that was produced by an outfit called PFC Energy in D.C. What it shows, the hard black line shows that oil production will plateau out and start dropping. This is not peak oil. This does not mean it's not there in the ground. It means it will not get produced. And that plateau, they've got it at about 100 million barrels a day. By the way, the world is using about 86 million barrels a day today. All right? So, and it'll use more, and I'll talk about it in a second. The red dashed line, they've got what they think the demand is going to be. And when that crosses over, folks, this is not going to be a spike in the price of oil. This will be a sustained increase in the price of oil. This will be the first time we have seen a true supply and demand imbalance. And so a lot of factors will go into it because biofuels could add to the supply and so forth. But I'm just saying, as it goes, by the way, this includes some biofuel component, this supply line. So the supply-demand imbalance is something to really worry about with the oil plateau coming up. So why is the demand going to go up? This is the reason the demand is going to go up. What you got on the vertical axis is the per capita ownership of vehicles, and on the horizontal axis is the per capita GDP. So this is cars ownership on the vertical, per capita GDP on the horizontal. This is what happened in the world is when people have become more prosperous, they've owned more cars. Okay, the frightening one is the yellow one on the bottom. You can't even see it. That's India. Imagine it's got a long ways to go. Okay, even China is way on the bottom left. So that is why the demand is going to go up. Because when people become more prosperous, they shift from a bicycle to a scooter to a car. It's inexorable. And the last two use hydrocarbons. So if the demand is going to keep, not in this country perhaps, but wherever it goes up, doesn't matter. Oil is fungible. It moves. It's arbitraged. So that's going to happen. So that being the case, what do we have? What's likely to happen? Oil will be replaced with gas. You notice the word I used, will be replaced with gas? I didn't say might be replaced with gas. And the reason it will be replaced with gas is twofold. One is that I'm going to tell you, and you're going to challenge it, that gas prices are going to stay low to moderate. And I'm going to give you a moderate thesis right now, and then you can quiz me on it. And I already told you oil prices will keep on going up. All the time, every day? No. Sometime out there, is there a sustained increase? Yes. Unless what? Unless we reduce demand. So the reduction of demand has two important principles for this country and any net importing country, which is it reduces imports. I heard an interesting talk the other day by Amy Jaffe, who gave an interesting twist on us sending money outside for oil. She pointed out that some of these countries get so flush with money, especially when the price of oil is high, that they produce an investment balloon, which then hits us. Okay, I hadn't heard that economic principle. Maybe it's even right. But certainly it's not a good idea to send your money elsewhere, create jobs somewhere else. So oil replacing gas will happen. Now, but what is the problem with that? The problem with gas is that gas prices have been highly variable, somewhere between $2 and $12. This is what the gas prices have been. This is from the EIA, going back to the 70s. And you will notice a couple of things. There are spikes, and these are monthly averages, by the way. The actual daily spot went up to $14 in some periods. But I actually took the areas under the curves. It turns out that only 4 non-contiguous months that is over $12, over $10. So here's the deal. It's pretty much not been much higher than, $7? Except for the spikes. So what might happen in the future that takes the spikes out? That's going to be my next argument. So if we're not for spikes, so uncertainty hurts the switch. Uncertainty prevents investment. Uncertainty increases discount rates, so your investment cost goes up. So where is the certainty here? Shale gas introduces certainty, provided we do it, and we do it right. Why? We expect the cost to be moderate, and here's the reason. The demand will drive the floor up. What will keep a lid on it? What will keep a lid on it is simply the nature of shale gas, which is that it's shallow, it's on land, and I'm going to tell you a statistic. Most shale gas wells, from the day you start drilling to the day you get production, is 30 days. Now, from the day you decide to do it and figure out how to join up to pipeline, I'll give you 90 days. Okay? I'll give you 180 days. That is incredibly small amount of time. That means the 3-month strip price can drive your behavior. You see the 3-month strip going up? Start drilling. Within 90 days, you're going to have production. So you think speculators are going to get into it? Unlikely. That's the lid. That lid has not been there before. Offshore gas takes 4 years, 5 years. So that lid has not been there before. That lid we will have. So that will assure that those spikes will be gone. By the way, this too I have written on. Nobody's thrown up major on it, so we'll see. But that is the crux of the argument, that gas prices will stay low to moderate, and so that will drive behavior. But here's the real key. Oil will keep going up. Right now, the calorific balance between oil and gas is factor of 4. What does that mean by that? That means that on an energy content basis, oil is 4 times as expensive as gas today. If gas doesn't go up much and oil does, guess what that does to the ratio? By the way, that didn't always the case. That didn't always used to be the case. It used to be that they used to be in pretty much close parity about 2 decades ago. Why they shouldn't parity is an argument. We'll discuss it. They shouldn't even be in parity, but we'll discuss it. So we'll expect the ratio to remain high, and this will drive the following. And I won't go into much detail. We'll have a talk on CNG for transport later today. So I'll just mention this. CNG for transport will happen, is happening. Kuala Lumpur, New Delhi, every public transport vehicle has gone to CNG, and it's done amazing things to emphysema levels in those cities. Okay, diesel is replaced, and diesel tends to have particulates, which does bad things to your lungs. So replacing diesel with CNG is very likely. Using petrol, gasoline with CNG is likely as well. That's for another talk. The big negative about CNG, it requires a 4 times bigger tank than a diesel tank. And for petrol, it will be, which way will it go? Diesel is about 15% more energy dense than petrol, than gasoline. So CNG has issues, but it has positives. Talk to the gentleman who will talk about this later today. For long hauls, you're going to need LNG, liquefied natural gas. And again, it's about 1.4 times the volume, more doable, but it's got issues such as infrastructure. And then finally, gas to liquids. And this is where we might have relevance in this state, and we'll discuss it. And from my standpoint, this is my personal preference, gasoline is the preferred target because I think the technology is a little bit easier and a little more tractable in the near future. Again, you want to chat about that, we will. Last 2 slides. This is so that those who are asleep can wake up now because it's nearly over. But there's Q&A, okay? So it's not over because I expect Q&A. Implication North Carolina. First of all, we should investigate the shale gas potential. Main reason to do that is labor intensive. Lots of wells, which is not good in some people's eyes, which means a lot of employment. As opposed to offshore wells, very few, very expensive, but most of that money goes to something else, goes to jewelry, if you will. Whereas shale gas, simple, a lot of labor, a lot of people getting work. We need to modify the laws. This is well known. The legislature knows this. Currently, we're not allowed to horizontal drilling in this state, nor allowed to fracture in this state. That will change. But it should change if we want to do shale gas. It should change anyway, even if we don't want to. We should address the environmental issues from the beginning. I was talking to the legislature. I said, let's do this one right, as opposed to Pennsylvania and New York and Texas and all these places who kind of fell into it. All right, we don't have to fall into it. We can do this one right from the get-go. We should do a saline water estimation. I think Dina or someone should take a look at that. Where are they? What is the quality of the salinity? What other elements are in it? We should consider deep disposal, consider the feasibility of it. What's down there? Will it accept the flows that we're going to put into it? Because that's the alternative to reuse or recycle of the fracture fluid. And it's something you should look at, because if you can do it for 25 cents, I'd probably do that rather than reuse it, because reuse got tricky stuff. Set zero discharge targets and timelines. Okay, and if that means get a team together to do it, that's cool. There should be regulatory oversight on well quality. Now, this addresses the issue of aquifer contamination. See, the thing is this: if it's done right, it will not happen. I can say that till the cows come home. Public is not going to believe that until we can show it's the case. And so we need to have, and it doesn't have to be expensive oversight in this case, because this is straightforward stuff. No oil company really wants this to happen. It does not happen in the main, but I think people are more comfortable to know there are regulations and there is oversight. And then pad drilling for all but early development. I told you that can't be done from the very beginning. That we should, I don't know if you can legislate it, but you can heavily encourage it or say, explain to us why not. I'm a techie. I don't know how all this rules and regulation stuff works, but I'm just pointing out stuff that I think we should do. Exactly how it gets done is up to legislators and state energy office and so forth to figure out. And then finally, we should investigate gas to liquids. Now, when I say investigate gas to liquids, the gas to liquids is a technology. It's a technology in my mind, needs some little oomph economically. And I think it can be done there. And here's the interesting thing. If there's a commercial incentive, technology gets, it happens. The commercial incentive here is that gas is going to stay low price. So people will probably move faster to develop the needful technology to make it more economic. But here's the next interesting point. This is an excellent companion to the use of biomass to liquids. In this state, we feel we have that's our should be our emphasis, is biomass used for stuff, for renewables. And here's the reason why biomass liquids make sense as a companion. The technology is identical after a first step. Okay, after what's called the syngas production. It is identical. Whether you use natural gas or biomass, it doesn't care after the first step is done. So there's a certain synergy to this that I think we can combine the existing thrust that we have on biomass usage towards this. And then finally, I think we need to modify the state fuel import reduction targets of 2017, 2018, I can't remember which. We should modify them to allow for natural gas for transport, which I don't think is there right now as a valid contribution, because all we really should care about is that we use less gasoline and less diesel coming into the state, across state borders. How that happens we should be agnostic on whether it's electric cars or whether it's natural gas. We should be agnostic on that point. I don't think the regulation today reads that way. And then should we say it's only for domestic? I said domestic using the state term, only for gas produced here? I don't know. That's a question mark. I don't think we should do that, but I think we should, because then it puts undue pressure on gas production in the state, and we don't want to put undue pressure on that. I think we want to do it right if we're going to do it.